know that, we're like two hearts that beats as one.
We were so sure that we were going to spend our lives together.
He seemed a perfect gentleman.
But, ooh, gosh, I just hit the jackpot, mate. Yeah.
I just knew that something was not right, and that gnawed away at me day and night.
So what is it in total? I forgot.
27,500.
I couldn't believe it. Where has my money gone?
Her profile picture was her on her wedding day, looking up adoringly into the eyes of her bridegroom, and her bridegroom was my husband.
This whole incident has just altered my perception of people.
Every person I've met is a lie. Everything's a lie. What an idiot.
They are vile human beings, and I can't stress that enough. They care about money, and they don't care who they have to trample on to get it.
Eve Gibney, welcome to the Honest to God podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you are very, very welcome. You told me this story and my jaw was just on the floor.
I just had to get Eve on the show to talk about this story because it was just one of the most craziest, unbelievable stories of deception I'd ever heard.
Eve Gibney's story leaves many who hear it in disbelief. But it really happened.
Get out of the way of that boring holiday video, will you?
Her husband of nearly 2 decades, Morris, had a secret. He had not one wife, but 2.
This was a huge, lavish wedding. There were photographs of him and her laughing, drinking champagne. Who was this woman that he'd married? Why had he married her while he was still married to me? It was like suddenly nothing made any sense.
I couldn't believe that this had happened to Eve, especially because of the way that she described how in love they were.
I thought I knew this man inside out, but I didn't. I didn't know who this man was at all. I've been really interested in travel from a really young age. Initially, I wanted to be a long-distance lorry driver because I thought that would take me to different places. Nursing was like the ideal profession to enable me to do both.
Eve's passionate and she's caring. She's very empathetic. She's just lovely.
At age 33, Eve's job takes her to Lagos, Nigeria, to work as a nurse for the Foreign Office.
Did you get one? I got these ones, not that one.
Okay.
Joining her on this new adventure is her 4-year-old son, Josh.
What's the best thing you've seen so far?
Where?
Here, in Masai Mara.
Thought that we were going to be sort of living in the jungle. Maybe there was going to be like a hut. We were going to live in a village with some native people. It was a different way of life for sure. One time I went home in a taxi because I missed the school bus and the taxi had no floor. I went home and said, "Oh, Mum, I've been in an episode of the Flintstones." And I had to explain to her that the taxi had no flaw to it. It's just yabba dabba do.
It was about a new life, a new opportunity, a new experience for me and Josh. Romance was never going to be part of the plan. It really wasn't. We were sitting at the bar. I turned to look across the room, and I saw him. I saw Morris. I had this distinct feeling that I knew him. And he was looking at me with the same sort of quizzical look. And he approached. His opening line was, "Do I know you? Have we met before?" So there was this like almost immediate connection. We just started chatting, and within minutes, we became the only two people in the room. Cliched as it sounds, and I know it does, it was almost like love at first sight. It really was. There was something very special there, and we both felt it. We both loved music, and we loved to dance. He was so easy to talk to. We were laughing a lot. We literally became inseparable from that moment onwards.
My mum said she had someone that she wanted me to meet. Just thought, yeah, this is a nice guy, you know. Well, whatever nice is when you're 4 years old. You know, you don't really know much, do you? Just, oh, he's a nice adult.
That really is beautiful, rainbow.
I wish we could get to there.
But when you get to a rainbow, it disappears.
How come?
Ask your dad.
Just became sort of normal quite quickly.
It all fell into place very quickly. It all seemed very comfortable.
After a whirlwind romance of only a few months, Eve and Morris marry at Cumlongan Castle in Dumfries on the 15th of August 1995.
We were so sure that we were going to spend our lives together and that that's how we wanted to live it. I just felt so incredibly close to him. It just seemed so right, such the right thing to do.
Although very much in love, Eve and Morris know his job in construction will often put distance between them.
We knew he might be sent away to work on a site for a couple of weeks or a longer period at times. I think it's very difficult for some people to understand how you can have that level of trust in somebody, given the fact that you're not always together. When you're both on the same wavelength and you both have the same moral compass, you have an unspoken understanding because you're both coming from the same place.
After the wedding, Eve and Morris settle into married life back in Lagos.
Does it say what's in it?
It's a snooze thing.
Is it?
What do you mean, is it?
And soon there's a new arrival. Baby Seb, born in 1998.
Sebby, come on.
My mum said to me, she said, "You're going to have a little brother." I always wanted a little brother or a brother in general, so that was my dream come true.
Yay, clever boy.
I wanted to be the best big brother ever.
Where's Joshy? Yeah! Where's Mummy? Where's Mummy? Yeah. Now, Well,
Sometimes you had to sort of say to yourself, I really am very lucky, you know, to have such a wonderful family.
In 2004, Morris's job uproots Eve and the children, moving them to Bonny Island, just off the west coast of Africa, where Eve forms a lasting friendship with fellow expat, Vicky Nolan.
I was in that kind of expat wife bubble. We all wore kind of shorts with a little vest top. And Eve was colourful and exotic and just laughed and very flamboyant. Yeah, I was excited that she kind of came to speak to me in the playground rather than any of the other kind of mums. It was so apparent what a solid couple Eve and Morris were. And they seemed very loving, very, very loving. They touched a lot. Quite enviable, actually. My impressions of Morris, he was a very measured man. He was very, very softly spoken. But he didn't have a lot of time for people who kind of broke the rules.
Unbeknown to his mother, Eve's son Josh believes he's seeing a very different Morris.
When I first met Morris, I thought he was a really nice guy. I thought this is just a normal man, a normal person. But that was all very short and sweet, to say the least. We went to the beach one weekend, and there was a gentleman who came to us selling CDs on the beach. And he said, "Would you like to buy a CD?" Morris said, "Yes, I would like to buy a CD, but I want you to run to the end of the beach until you get to the very end of the beach. And if you run, then I'll be there in 10 minutes, but you better run quick. Otherwise, you know, I may not buy the CD." He says, "Yes, sir." And he runs as fast as he can. And Morris was still standing there with a smirk on his face, knowing fully well that he wasn't going to go meet this man on the other side of the beach. So I think it was at that point where I realized this person was someone who really enjoyed to be in a position of power over other people who were vulnerable. The second me and him are alone, comments would always have to be made about, you know, well, why aren't you hanging out with someone today? Well, that's because you don't have any friends, because who would want to be friends with you? You're not a cool kid, are you? This is behavior that happened throughout my whole childhood. I always wanted to talk to someone about this, but there were times where he said, "No, you won't tell anyone that we've talked about this." I felt like I was so alone in this situation because I just thought, why can't anyone else see this other side to him?
In 2007, with Josh preparing to take his GCSE exams, he, Eve and Seb moved back to England.
Morris continued to work out in Nigeria and then ended up working in France. But we began to think about the fact that maybe the travelling days were over and maybe it was really time to build our base in our family home. But Morris couldn't find a job in the UK.
So when another opportunity presents itself in the Middle East in 2011, Morris and Eve decide this will be the last job that will separate him from his family.
Probably with a bit of persuasion from me, he decided to accept a job in Oman. And he took the job on the fact that it was a 6-month contract, and then that would be it. He would be coming home. So when I waved him off at the airport, I really did think, yep, this is going to be the last time, and we wouldn't all be apart again.
By December 2011, Eve and Maurice Gibney have been married 16 years. Eve and their 13-year-old son Seb are looking forward to visiting Maurice in Oman for Christmas.
Just before we were about to go, he emailed to say that he was going to have to go into the desert for work. And unfortunately, that was going to be over the actual Christmas period. I just said, no, look, it's okay. We'll come out. I'd been to Muscat before. I knew my way round well enough. And that we'd just postpone Christmas and have it when he came back from the desert. We always had a pattern of what we did when we travelled. We always had to text each other just as the plane was about to take off. And as soon as we arrived, we would text each other to say, landed. And so when we arrived in Muscat, we'd done exactly what we normally do, and I expected him to be there in the arrivals hall waiting for us, but he wasn't. I messaged him, and he was struggling to find a parking space, but it was just a little bit odd. There was lots of empty car parking spaces between the airport and where we met him, and yet he'd said that he was struggling to find a parking place. And of course, I ran forward to hug him as we normally would do, and he backed away and reminded me that, you know, we shouldn't hug in public in Oman. But I knew as a married couple that was acceptable to show physical affection, within reason, obviously, towards each other. So his behaviour seemed a little bit odd.
We went over to stay with some friends, and Eve said, oh, we're there at the same time. Fantastic. We hooked up. I could see there was something not quite right. Eve wasn't her usual animated self. Maurice was even quieter than usual. Seb wasn't his usual smiley self either. And looking back on it now, it's obvious that something was going on.
Maurice heads off for work in the desert, leaving Eve and Seb to pass the time alone for 6 days over Christmas. But Eve starts to feel something is not quite right.
There was poor internet connection. My phone would ring, and as soon as I picked it up, it would cut off. And so I presumed it was him trying to get in touch. We never even heard from him on Christmas Day, and that was really disappointing for Seb too. When Maurice came back from the desert, his mood had changed, and he said it was because he really felt like he'd let us down by not being there over the Christmas period. And then all too soon, the holiday was over, and it was the beginning of January, and Seb and I were flying home.
Eve and Seb return to the UK. But as the months pass, contact from Maurice becomes sporadic.
Emails weren't quite as often, and text messages weren't quite as often. When he was coming home on leave, often his leave was cut short because there was a work emergency. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I knew something wasn't quite right.
I thought this is different in comparison to how he normally is. I knew what he was like. You know, this was the side of him which was the real side of him which no one else knew, apart from me.
When Maurice does return to the UK in June, he asks to talk to Eve alone.
He suggested that we go for a walk. So I packed a picnic lunch and off we went. I remember it was a beautiful sunny day and unusually hot for that time of year. We unpacked our picnic lunch and began to talk about his depression. He felt trapped within the confines of the marriage and that he didn't feel that he was a particularly good husband to me. He didn't feel he was a particularly good father to the children. And he felt that if we were no longer married, he would come back as a better person in the role of father, in the role of husband, and in every other way. So he asked me for a divorce. But he told me that we would keep it a secret. We would never tell anybody that we had got divorced, not even the children. And we would continue to live our life as if we were still husband and wife, but he would just feel freer. So would I agree to that? And I was stunned. And I thought, is it because he's met somebody else? So I asked him outright, and he denied it. He told me that he still loved me, but that this was the only way he could see that we could move forwards. I said, I'm never going to keep it a secret. The children would have to know. I'm not going to lie to the children about something so serious as this. And so I refused to go along with his plan. But he said to me, if you don't agree, then one day I'll just get on my motorbike and I'll ride off into the desert, and I've plotted it on a map, the point where I'll run out of fuel, and you'll never ever know what happened to me. It was a difficult drive home. I was driving, but I really couldn't concentrate. And we went to pick Seb up, who had been playing at a friend's house. And as we were driving back home, Morris just said, should we get a takeaway? Because we've had such a lovely day. You don't want to cook, do you? And I thought, a lovely day? What? I just thought it was part of the mood-changing process he was going through. I really didn't understand it, but he never spoke about it again, so I let it go.
The remainder of the year passes with no mention of Morris's unusual request.
Here we go. 5, 4,
It's December 2012.
2, 1.
The family planned to spend the Christmas break together in the UK. But on the day he is due to fly home from Oman, Morris drops another bombshell.
He said his depression had reached a peak and that he'd been having counselling. The counsellor had told him it was probably advisable not to come home. Where was his state of mind at that point in time, where he felt it was better to stay alone in Oman rather than be home with his family? I was in turmoil because I really didn't know how to explain his behaviour, because it didn't make sense to me.
I think she was right to be worried. There was something going on. There was something badly wrong. But we had all presumed that it was to do with his mental health.
Eve and the boys spend another Christmas without Morris. When he eventually returns to the UK in January 2013, Eve wants answers.
I knew it had to be addressed. We were all worried, concerned. When I did try to talk to him, he just point blank refused. He just would not address the issue at all and would just walk away from me or become quite angry or change the subject.
Eve claims that after an argument, Morris drives off, leaving her clueless about where he's gone.
I needed to make sure he was okay. And I thought, I can call the car hire company and they can tell me, did he return the car? Because then I know if he did, he must have gone back to Oman, and that means he's okay. I knew the car hire company name, so I looked them up, looked the number up, and I called them. I had a conversation with the lady that answered the phone, and I explained to her that I'd had an argument with my husband and I was concerned because I hadn't heard from him, and I just needed to know that the car had been returned. And she explained, yes, the car had actually been returned. She said, yes, of course, I remember him so well because I hired the car out to him at Christmas. And I said, are you sure that was him at Christmas? And she said, oh, yeah. And I can also see that it was the same credit card that was used for both car hires. It was definitely him. And I couldn't understand what she was saying to me because he wasn't here at Christmas. He was in Oman because he said he was too depressed to come home. But she was absolutely sure of it. In fact, she even gave me the address where the car was registered to, near Birmingham. So I looked up who lived on that address. Without even thinking, I just dialed the number. There was an answer phone message that said this was the answer phone of, and it named the couple that lived there.
Looking up the couple on social media, Eve discovers the man also works for a company based in Oman. She convinces herself that Morris had hired the car for a colleague and didn't come back to the UK himself.
At certain times, you allow yourself to believe what you want to believe. I needed to be reassured that he wasn't having an affair. And I felt the information in front of me reassured me of that.
But as days turn to weeks, Eve says she hears nothing from her husband.
I didn't understand anything that had happened. The one thing I did understand was this was the end of the marriage. This was not the man I'd fallen in love with. So there was no option. I applied for divorce.
Desperate to find out what's going on, Eve decides Morris's bank statements may shed light on where he's been.
I knew I was going to find something in those bank statements that he was trying to keep hidden from me. So I went to our local bank, who knew that Morris worked overseas, and I have to admit, I did say that he was looking for the bank statements for his accountant. I was shocked by what I saw.
Eve claims ATM transactions on Morris's bank account reveal secret trips back to the UK. So where had Morris been?
We were so excited about going to live in Oman. I told Yvonne, I said, oh, guess where we're going? We're going to Oman. We'll see Morris. He's living in Muscat. We'll get together. It's a small city, so you knew that you were going to bump into the same faces. We tried several times to meet up. I remember the one time we were going to meet around the poolside bar in the Hyatt, and we arrived there and we waited and we waited. But then we got a message saying he was terribly sorry that he couldn't make it. He'd have to go into the desert. Oh, my husband then said, why does he have to go into the desert? It became apparent that he was avoiding us. We just didn't bump into him at all. We didn't bump into him in the supermarkets that expats frequented. We didn't bump into him at the clubhouse or the bar. We just didn't bump into him at all.
Until Vicky says she and her husband Sam finally do bump into Morris, and he isn't alone.
We were quite astonished to see sitting on two bar stools, side by side, Morris alongside a lady. He saw us and we saw him. I think there was a kind of slight nod, but that was it. He didn't come to us and we didn't go over to him. Just to the left of this area was a glassed-in smoking room, and it had one-way glass. It was 3 to 4 feet maximum away from them. I stood there and I smoked and I looked and I looked. I was looking for anything that might give away what is this relationship. There was no indication of romance, there was no eye gazing, there wasn't a lot of talking, there wasn't a lot of laughter. Now, having known Morris and Eve together and how Morris behaved, seemingly with a woman that he loved and adored, his behaviour couldn't have been more different. A little bit later, Sam got up and went to the gentleman's lavatories, and on his way out of the gentleman's, Morris had walked up to him and said to Sam, "What happens in Oman stays in Oman." Sam turned round and he said, "I don't think I can guarantee that, Morris."
It's the start of a new year, and Eve hasn't heard directly from Morris since their fight the previous January. She claims his bank statements show secret trips back to the UK, but Eve doesn't know why. Studying them closer, she tracks a number of cash withdrawals in the Birmingham area. Close to the address his hire car was registered to at Christmas, when he'd said he was staying in Oman.
That house near Birmingham was the connection to everything else. I needed to know. So I picked up the phone. I had no plan. I had not rehearsed what I was going to say. A man answered the phone and I explained I was from the car hire company, and literally off the top of my head, I said that I was calling to try to locate Morris Gibney because the car that he had hired the previous Christmas had been involved in an incident that had no relation to him, but the police had taken the vehicle and the police needed to know the details of everyone who had hired the vehicle. So I said to the man at the other end of the phone, because he had registered the car to this address, I thought it was worth a try to see if he was there. And the man said, no, he lives in Oman, but he does stay here every time he comes home. So it chatted for a little bit, and I said, could I just take your name and what relation you are? And he said, yes, of course, I'm his brother-in-law.
Eve hangs up the phone, but determined to get answers, she calls the number back.
A lady answered, and I said, oh, hello, my name's Eve Gibney. I know this is going to sound a bit of a crazy question, but your husband had said he was Morris Gibney's brother-in-law. Why did he say he was his brother-in-law? And she said, well, because he's married to my sister.
Shocked by what she's heard, Eve drives to her mother-in-law's house, along with son Josh, convinced her husband's mother will tell her the truth.
We knocked on her door, and she was really shocked to see us. I said, I've come to talk to you about Morris. There's a really serious situation. I said to her, I've had a very bizarre phone call with these people, and I named them. And I said, they've told me that Morris is married to their sister. I said, no, that's not true, is it? That can't be true. She went behind the sofa and she started puffing up cushions and putting them in their place while I asked her questions that she refused to answer and just kept saying, I wouldn't know the answer to that. I wouldn't know the answer to that. I don't know why you're asking me these questions.
She seemed sort of like very panicky. Why are you here? You know, walking around the room, you know, just touching things. She just didn't want to have any part of it.
She smoothed out the cloth on the back of the sofa several times. She was almost like, I felt like hiding behind the sofa, trying to hide from me and my questioning. I just said, we are still married. You do know that, don't you? And she said, get out. And she told us never to come back. She never wanted to see us again.
So we left. And we were driving home, and it was at that point where I just said to my mum, I was like, yeah, Mum, like, Morris married that other woman.
It was really difficult to drive home. I couldn't focus on the road at all. My mind was just racing, because even though I knew, without any evidence, I knew it was true. I didn't understand why he would have married somebody else. I couldn't make any sense of any of it. I just knew that something was not right, and that gnawed away at me.
Eve has only one lead, the family in Birmingham. Following a trail of social media posts, she discovers the couple have a daughter.
I went on Facebook. I found her Facebook page. And I literally scrolled through hundreds and hundreds of messages and went back so many months. And then I saw a post that said, happy birthday to the best auntie in the world, Suzanne. And I clicked on Suzanne's name. And it took me straight to her Facebook page. And her profile picture was her on her wedding day, wearing a tiara, with her hair swept up, looking up adoringly into the eyes of her bridegroom, who had his hand around her waist. And her bridegroom was my husband, Morris Gibney.
Eve's worst fears are confirmed. Her husband, Morris, has bigamously married another woman.
I felt a huge panic attack just coming over me where I really couldn't breathe. My chest felt really tight and I couldn't take the breaths that I needed to.
My mum called me Josh. I thought, what is wrong? What is wrong? I seen her just looking at the screen, but shaking, just shaking.
It's a big wedding. It looks like it's in Oman. And his mother's there, and other members of his family. And my mother-in-law was walking him down the aisle, arm in arm with Morris. She had told me she didn't know what I was talking about when I asked her if he'd remarried. I didn't understand why they were there when they knew he was still married to me. It felt like they had all conspired against me, and they were all maintaining this lie. Why? Why would they do that? Morris had told his family that we had divorced secretly years ago and not told anybody about it. He had also told them that I was crazy, and that's why no one should have anything to do with me, and that I might come out there and wreck the wedding. Basically, he played one person off against another and gaslighted everybody.
This is someone who has another side, and I always knew what he could be capable of. What else can I expect? This is who he is. You guys are getting to finally know the real side of this person.
All the clues were coming together. Eve's friend Vicky made a connection between Morris's secret bride and the woman she had seen with him in Muscat.
If you look back, hindsight's fantastic. How differently things might have played out if we'd gone over and said, "Hi, Morris, who's this?"
Studying social media posts, Eve learns Morris proposed to his unsuspecting wife in May 2012, more than 6 months before he skipped Christmas by pretending to stay in Oman. And when he'd claimed he was working in the desert during Eve and Seb's visit in December 2011, Eve says Morris was really celebrating 3,700 miles away with another woman in the UK.
That was when we carried on as a normal, loving family and as a normal, loving married couple. None of it made any sense. I had 1,000 questions running through my head. Who was this woman that he'd married? She was a school teacher in an international school in Muscat. Suddenly, things began to fall into place. I recalled when Seb and I had arrived that Christmas in Muscat and how Morris had avoided us in the arrivals hall, claiming he couldn't find anywhere to park. I had seen the end of term dates, and that date was the date we had arrived, which meant he had very probably taken Suzanne to the airport. And I knew then, even that far back, he was leading a duplicitous life.
Later that week, Eve goes to the police to pursue criminal charges of bigamy against Morris, for which the maximum penalty is 7 years in prison. The police open a case file, but Eve carries on her own investigation, signing up her friend, Vicky, to help.
To commit bigamy, you have to also commit fraud, because you have to sign an affidavit to say that you're free to marry, and he wasn't.
Because we were in Muscat, we were able to do certain legwork. We were like the Muscat division of the Ladies Detective Agency. Initially, it began with, where has this happened?
An Arabic-speaking family friend called the churches in Oman, but there was no record of Morris and Suzanne marrying in any church. So a bit of a mystery was beginning to develop.
But there's another location where UK nationals can get married in Oman, the British Embassy. The embassy confirms Morris and Suzanne married there. And their marriage certificate provides a crucial piece of evidence. Morris lied, in writing, to enable his bigamous wedding to take place. Now armed with proof of bigamy, the police press charges against Morris. Eve prepares to face her husband of almost 19 years in court.
It was really difficult standing up in front of all of those people and talking about the most personal, intimate feelings that I had in relation to Morris and the crime that he had committed against us.
In October 2014, Morris pleads guilty and is sentenced to 6 months in prison, suspended for 2 years.
In effect, he walked out of the court a free man. There was no punishment as far as I was concerned. There was no justice. I felt so desperately, desperately let down by the legal system.
But there is a further sting in the tail. Eve discovers Morris is using undeclared Omani bank accounts and did not disclose more than £200,000. Now divorced, there was no mention of these assets in their original settlement. Eve fights to have their divorce reopened. She presents proof of the hidden funds, as well as the photographs of his bigamous wedding. In April 2018, a judge grants her a new settlement, giving her full ownership of their family home.
I could have pursued him for the thousands and thousands of pounds that he had basically stolen from me and the children. But even though I was in financial difficulties, I chose not to do that because I felt the money was tainted and I knew it would never bring him any happiness.
Maurice and Suzanne marry legally in November 2014.
I'm really proud of Eve. The Yvonne that I've seen today is stronger, even though this awful thing happened to her. There is a strength and a determination that I always knew was there in Eve, but my word, it's so apparent now.
Today, Eve is happily living on the Wirral, Merseyside, and has a new partner, Paul. She and her sons have been able to move on from the effects of Maurice's deceit.
I thought for however long it takes for the rest of my life, I'm going to apply myself to as many things I can. I was free and I could really learn to become the best version of myself.
Myself, Josh and Seb, we're all in a much better place. We've moved on and we're really happy. I've written a book for other people to learn from my experiences. I had a really hard battle on my hands, yet I won that battle. And I hope that other people can go forward in the same way and get justice for themselves too, just as I did for myself and my boys.